I still remember the pride I felt looking at my $8,000 setup, the culmination of years of hard work as a software developer. That feeling made the betrayal even worse. My younger brother Jake moved back with our parents into my house temporarily, and things started disappearing from my office. When I installed a camera and caught him stealing my equipment, I never expected my own parents would take his side. The hardest lesson I ever learned was that sometimes family can be your worst enemies. If you are watching this right now, drop a comment telling me where you are from, hit subscribe, and stick around to see how I went from family doormat to serving eviction papers to my own blood. After growing up in a middle-class neighborhood in Michigan, I managed to put myself through college with a combination of scholarships and working part-time jobs. I am Malcolm, 32 years old now, and I have built a pretty successful career as a software developer. Nothing was ever handed to me. Every step forward came from my own determination and countless late nights of hard work. That work ethic eventually allowed me to purchase a modest but comfortable 3-bedroom house in a nice suburb. It is not a mansion by any means, but it is mine, and I was proud of what I had accomplished without any financial help from my family. My pride and joy was my home office. Over the course of 3 years, I had invested nearly $8,000 into building the perfect workspace. My custom-built PC with dual monitors and specialized graphics card for rendering professional-grade microphones and camera equipment for client calls, and my side business creating tutorial videos and licensed software that cost more than some used cars. Every piece was carefully selected and saved for. This setup was not just expensive toys. It was the heart of my livelihood and my future. 6 months ago, my parents called with devastating news. They had fallen behind on their mortgage payments after my dad lost his job and the bank was foreclosing on their house. They needed a place to stay, and as their only financially stable child, they turned to me. I offered my spare bedrooms as temporary housing, expecting the arrangement to last maybe 2 or 3 months while they got back on their feet. My younger brother Jake would be coming too. Jake and I could not be more different. At 26, he had dropped out of college twice, never held a job longer than 6 months, and had a gambling problem he refused to acknowledge. Where I was careful and responsible with money, Jake spent whatever he had the moment it touched his hands. Yet my parents constantly made excuses for him, saying he was just finding himself or that he was the creative type who was not built for conventional success. I had learned to bite my tongue years ago, but their favoritism toward Jake had always been a source of tension. When they moved in, I established clear house rules. The most important was that my office was strictly off-limits. That space contained not only expensive equipment, but also client information that I was legally obligated to keep secure. Everyone agreed to the boundaries, and the first few weeks went relatively smoothly. My parents were grateful Jake was unusually subdued, and I was happy to be able to help my family through a difficult time. The harmony did not last. Small things began to change. My office door, which I always kept closed, would sometimes be slightly ajar when I returned from errands. Items on my desk would be in different positions than how I left them. At first, I dismissed these observations as paranoia or forgetfulness on my part. After all, I was under additional stress with 3 extra people in my previously peaceful home. The first concrete sign of trouble came when I opened my computer one morning and found all my mouse settings had been changed. The sensitivity was different, and my custom shortcuts had been reset. When I casually mentioned this at dinner, Jake avoided eye contact while my parents suggested I might have done it myself and forgotten. The same thing happened twice more that week. After the third incident, I decided to take action. Without telling my family, I installed a small, discreet security camera on my bookshelf with a clear view of my desk and computer. It seemed extreme, but something was happening in my office and I needed proof. When I asked Jake directly if he had been using my computer, his defensiveness only increased my suspicions. He practically spat at me. "I did not touch your precious computer, Malcolm. Not everything is about your stuff, you know." My parents quickly changed the subject, complimenting the meal and asking about my job. Their avoidance of conflict was nothing new, but it left the tension unresolved. Looking back, I should have pushed harder then, but I still wanted to believe the best of my family. 3 weeks after installing the camera, I returned home a day early from a business trip to San Francisco. The house was empty when I arrived, giving me the perfect opportunity to check the security footage from the past few days. What I saw made my blood run cold. There was Jake not only sitting at my desk, but giving what appeared to be a tour of my equipment to two friends I had never met. "This is my streaming setup," he told them, gesturing proudly to my carefully curated workspace. Pretty sick, right? $8,000 worth of tech, and I am just getting started. I watched in disbelief as they handled my equipment, unplugged components, and even spilled energy drinks dangerously close to my keyboard. The footage from the following day showed Jake alone removing my specialized graphics card and carefully placing it in his backpack before leaving. The timestamp showed this happened just yesterday. My hands were shaking as I continued reviewing the footage from the past weeks. This was not a one-time occurrence. Jake had been regularly using my setup when I was at work, apparently for some new streaming hobby he had started. Worse, he had been systematically removing smaller components, camera lenses, and even software license dongles. A quick check of my equipment confirmed my fears. My $2,000 graphics card was missing, along with several other expensive components. Some items had been returned, but they showed signs of mishandling, with smudges on camera lenses and frayed cables that had been improperly disconnected. I spent the next hour documenting everything that was missing or damaged. The total value exceeded $3,000, not including potential data breaches if Jake had accessed client files. I could hardly process what was happening. My own brother was stealing from me while living under my roof, eating food I paid for and benefiting from my generosity. When my family returned home that evening, I called an immediate meeting in the living room. I had my laptop ready with selected footage and my list of missing items. I wanted to handle this calmly and rationally, despite the rage and betrayal boiling inside me. "Jake, Mom, Dad, we need to talk about something serious," I began, trying to keep my voice steady. "I have evidence that Jake has been entering my office without permission, using my equipment and taking components." Jake immediately went on the defensive. "What are you talking about?" "I hardly ever go in there." Before he could continue his denials, I turned my laptop around and played the video of him showing off my setup to his friends. The color drained from his face, but only momentarily. "So I borrowed your computer a few times." "Big deal. You are never home anyway, and that stuff just sits there most of the time." He shrugged, as if stealing thousands of dollars of equipment was nothing more than taking a pen. I scrolled to the footage of him removing the graphics card. "Where is this now, Jake? This alone is worth $1,500. Jake glanced nervously at our parents before mumbling, "I just needed it for a few days for a streaming project. I was going to put it back." That was when my father spoke up in a tone that sent chills down my spine, not because it was angry, but because it was defensive of Jake. "Malcolm, you know how interested your brother has been in starting a career in streaming and content creation. Could you not have just let him borrow the equipment if he had asked?" I stared at my father in disbelief. "I am not talking about borrowing. I am talking about theft. And no, I would not have loaned him a $1,500 graphics card that I need for my work." My mother joined in then, her voice taking on that familiar tone she always used when defending Jake. "Honey, you make good money. You can afford to replace things if they get damaged. Jake is trying to find his path, and you should be supporting him, not acting like he committed some terrible crime." "He pawned my graphics card," I said, flatly revealing the information I had been holding back. "I called every pawn shop in the area this afternoon. Continental Pawn has it. They gave him $400 for it. That is theft, plain and simple." Instead of the shock and disapproval I expected, my parents exchanged looks that sent my stomach sinking. My mother reached over and patted Jake's hand. "Jake, is this true? Did you pawn your brother's computer part?" she asked in the gentle tone she never used with me. Jake had the audacity to look annoyed, rather than ashamed. "I needed the money for a down payment on my own equipment. I was going to get it back as soon as my first streaming checks came in." He turned to me with a scowl. "You can afford new stuff, Malcolm. You make what, 6 figures? Meanwhile, I'm trying to start a career from scratch. You should be helping me, not holding me back." I could not believe what I was hearing. The conversation was turning me into the villain for not wanting my possessions stolen. It felt like I had entered some bizarre alternate reality. You know, Malcolm, my father said, leaning forward with his hands clasped, family helps family. You would not be where you are today without the sacrifices your mother and I made raising you. I just stared at him. Yes, they had provided basic necessities growing up, but I had worked for everything else. My college tuition, my professional certifications, my house, all came from my own hard work. The conversation took an even more surreal turn when my mother suggested, since you already have all this equipment and Jake needs it to start his career, why not just let him have your office set up? We could move your work things to the Senub dining room, and you could build a new system over time. It would be such a wonderful gesture of support. Jake's expression shifted from defensive to smug in an instant. That would actually be perfect. My followers would love the professional look. I felt like I was drowning. This was not just about the stolen equipment anymore. This was about a fundamental lack of respect. My family saw me not as a person with boundaries deserving of respect, but as a resource to be tapped for their benefit. You want me to give my $8,000 professional setup to Jake as a reward for stealing from me? I asked incredulously. Do not be so materialistic, Malcolm, my mother scolded. This is about supporting your brother's dreams. Besides, Aunt Linda told me you promised to help Jake get started with equipment months ago. That was another shock. I had never made such a promise. Apparently, my parents had been telling the extended family that I had offered to fund Jake's latest whim, painting me as the bad guy, when the imaginary offer failed to materialize. I tried one more time to reason with them. That equipment is essential for my work. My livelihood depends on it. Jake stole from me. He damaged expensive components. In what world is the solution to give him everything he stole and more? My father stood up, his expression hardening. This attitude of yours is exactly why Jake struggles with confidence. You have always been selfish with your success. After all we have done for you, taking us in during our time of need, this is how you repay us, by refusing to help your brother. The sheer injustice of his statement left me speechless. I had opened my home to them, fed them, expected nothing in return. And now I was selfish for not wanting my belongings stolen. Jake jumped in, emboldened by our parents' support. You owe this to the family, Malcolm. You have always thought you were better than us just because you make more money. It is time you shared some of that success. I knew then that nothing I could say would make them understand. They had already decided that Jake was entitled to whatever he wanted of mine. Staying would only lead to an explosion I might regret. I need some air, I said, grabbing my keys. We will continue this conversation when everyone has cooled down. As I drove around the neighborhood trying to process what had happened, I realized this violation went beyond the missing equipment. My entire relationship with my family was built on sand. They did not respect me or my boundaries. To them, I was simply the successful son who owed everyone else a piece of his hard work. When I returned home 3 hours later, determined to have a more productive conversation, I discovered my office door's lock had been broken. The remaining camera equipment was gone, along with my backup external drives. That was the moment I knew I had to take drastic action. The next morning, I called in sick to work and began researching my options. My first call was to my friend Ethan, who worked as a paralegal at a local law firm. I explained the situation and asked for advice. You have two separate issues here, Malcolm, he told me. First, there is the theft, which is straightforward. You have video evidence, and you can file a police report. Second, there is the living situation with your family. Unfortunately, since they have been staying with you for 6 months, they likely have established residency rights under state law, even without a formal lease. That complication had not occurred to me. I could not simply change the locks and bar them from entering. I would need to follow a formal eviction process. For the rest of the morning, I meticulously documented everything. I compiled video clips, created a spreadsheet of stolen and damaged items with their values, and gathered receipts and insurance information. I photographed the broken office door lock and the empty spaces where equipment had been. At the police station, Officer Garcia reviewed my evidence with professional detachment. This is clearly theft, Mr. Reynolds. The video evidence is compelling. We will file a report and investigate. Have you confronted the suspect? I explained my family's reaction, which raised her eyebrows. While there was a professional neutrality to her expression, I could see the sympathy in her eyes. Family situations are always complicated, she acknowledged. But theft is theft, regardless of who commits it. When I mentioned that Jake had pawned some items, she perked up. That makes our job easier. Pawn shops keep records of who sells items, including identification. We can recover those pieces as stolen property. Next, I consulted with a tenant rights attorney to understand the eviction process. Given that I had never established a formal rental agreement with my family, I would need to provide 30 days' notice for them to vacate. I drafted the notice that afternoon, feeling a strange mix of determination and heartbreak. Before returning home, I rented a small storage unit and moved my remaining valuable equipment there. I also purchased better locks for my bedroom and office, though I knew these were just temporary measures. When I finally returned home that evening, I found my parents and Jake waiting for me, their expressions a mixture of anger and feigned concern. "We were worried about you, Malcolm," my mother began. "You left so upset yesterday, and then you did not come home last night." "I did come home," I replied calmly. "I found my office door broken open and more equipment missing. I stayed at a hotel." The flash of guilt across Jake's face told me all I needed to know, though my father quickly jumped to his defense. The lock must have been faulty. Jake only needed to borrow a few things for an audition video he is making for a sponsorship opportunity. Rather than argue, I handed each of them an envelope. Inside was the formal notice to vacate, giving them 30 days to find new accommodations. "What is this?" my father demanded, scanning the document. "An eviction notice. You cannot be serious. We are your family. I am completely serious," I replied. "I have also filed a police report regarding the stolen equipment. Officer Garcia from the County Sheriff's Department will be contacting you, Jake. I have provided them with the security footage." The room erupted. My mother burst into tears, my father shouted about family loyalty, and Jake alternated between threats and sudden claims that everything had been a misunderstanding. I had anticipated this reaction and remained calm. "This is not about the equipment anymore," I explained. "This is about respect and boundaries. I invited you into my home when you needed help, and in return you have enabled and encouraged Jake to steal from me. You have made it clear that you do not respect me or my property." My phone began ringing with calls from extended family within the hour. Word had spread quickly, with my parents' version of events, painting me as the villain who was throwing his family onto the street over a misunderstanding. I declined most calls, sending brief text messages explaining that there was more to the situation than they had been told. Aunt Susan, who had always been fair, was the only relative I spoke with at length. After hearing my side and reviewing some of the video evidence, she was appalled. "Those are not misunderstandings, Malcolm. That is theft. Plain and simple. You have every right to protect yourself." Her support meant more than I could express, a small island of validation in a sea of family pressure. Over the next few days, the situation at home became increasingly tense. My parents alternated between cold silence and attempts at emotional manipulation. "After all we have done for you," my mother sobbed one evening. "How can you do this to your own parents? Where are we supposed to go?" I remained firm. "You have 30 days to find a new place. Dad has been working for 3 months now. You have income. There are affordable apartments within your budget. I have researched several options and can provide you with listings." Jake took a different approach, veering between rage and sudden attempts at reconciliation. "This is just a misunderstanding between brothers," he insisted one day. "I was going to surprise you by upgrading your system once my channel took off. The equipment was just a loan." When I did not respond to this obvious lie, he switched tactics. "You will regret this, Malcolm. Nobody will ever see you the same way after you throw your family out on the street. Is that the reputation you want?" A week after filing the police report, Officer Garcia called with news. "We have recovered several items from Continental Pawn and Electronic Exchange. The store records confirm your brother sold them. We will need you to come identify the property. Also, the detective assigned to your case would like to discuss possible charges." The items recovered included my graphics card and 2 professional microphones, though all showed signs of mishandling. The detective explained that given the value of the stolen property and the clear evidence Jake was facing potential felony charges, your brother has no prior criminal record, which works in his favor, the detective explained. If he cooperates, fully returns all stolen items, and makes restitution for damages, the prosecutor might consider a plea deal with reduced charges. I agreed that rehabilitation was preferable to severe punishment, though I insisted on full restitution. I wanted consequences that would force Jake to acknowledge his actions, not destroy his future. When I shared this development with my parents, their reaction was predictable. They accused me of heartlessness and claimed I was ruining Jake's life over mere objects. What kind of person presses charges against their own brother? My father demanded. The kind who has been stolen from and disrespected in his own home, I replied calmly. I am not doing this to punish Jake. I am doing this because actions need consequences. Without them, nothing will change. The most difficult moment came when my mother, tears streaming down her face, told me, "If you go through with this, you are no longer our son. We will never speak to you again." Despite the pain her words caused, I held firm. That is your choice to make, Mom. I hope someday you will understand that this was necessary. 3 weeks after serving the eviction notice, I returned home from work to find the house eerily quiet. A note on the kitchen counter informed me that my parents had moved in with my uncle temporarily. They had taken all their belongings and some of my kitchen appliances, which I decided not to pursue. Jake had apparently left a few days earlier, without telling anyone where he was going. I changed the locks that evening, feeling a complex mixture of relief, sadness, and resolve. The police located Jake 2 days later at a friend's apartment. He was served with formal charges, but released on his own recognizance pending a court date. My parents refused to speak to me, directly communicating only through my aunt when absolutely necessary. Over the following weeks, I slowly began rebuilding my home office. Insurance covered some of the losses, and the recovered items helped, though several pieces were never found. More important than the physical reconstruction was the emotional processing I was doing with the help of a therapist who specialized in family trauma. We often imagine that family will always have our backs. "Doctor," Winters observed during one session, "when that fundamental assumption is violated, it shakes our entire sense of security. What you are feeling, this mixture of guilt and righteousness, anger and grief, is completely normal." Those sessions helped me understand that my actions were not just about stolen computer equipment, they were about establishing that I deserved basic respect even from family, perhaps especially from family. 3 months after my family moved out, I received an unexpected call from my mother. Her voice was hesitant, lacking the confident righteousness I had grown accustomed to hearing. "Malcolm, I have been seeing a family therapist," she began. "She has helped me see some things more clearly. I owe you an apology." Her words caught me completely off guard. An apology was the last thing I had expected. The therapist helped me understand how we, your father and I, have enabled Jake's behavior over the years. We thought we were being supportive parents, but we were actually preventing him from growing up and taking responsibility. She paused, and I could hear the emotion in her voice. "I am also sorry for how we treated you. We took advantage of your generosity and failed to respect your boundaries. You deserved better from us." Though part of me wanted to hold onto the anger that had protected me these past months, I found myself grateful for her acknowledgement. It was a first step toward healing, even if the road ahead would be long. Jake's legal issues were resolved through a plea deal that required full restitution, community service, and mandatory counseling. The felony charges were reduced to misdemeanors, which would not permanently impact his future if he completed the program successfully. When we finally met face to face at the courthouse, I hardly recognized my brother. Gone was the entitled attitude, replaced by genuine remorse, or at least a convincing appearance of it. "I messed up, Malcolm. Badly. I do not expect forgiveness, but I want you to know I am working on myself. The counselor is helping me understand why I did what I did. My father still does not speak to me at length, finding it difficult to reconcile his perception of family loyalty with my actions. Our conversations are brief and functional, but no longer hostile. He too is beginning to recognize the toxic patterns that led to our family breakdown, though his pride makes acknowledgement difficult. The most unexpected outcome of this painful chapter has been the strengthening of relationships outside my immediate family. Friends who stood by me during the crisis have become a chosen family of sorts. My Aunt Susan has become a surrogate parent figure, offering the unconditional but boundaried love I never fully received growing up. My new home office, now secured with proper locks and a comprehensive security system, has become a symbol of my growth. It represents not just professional success, but personal strength, the ability to establish and maintain healthy boundaries. Perhaps the most meaningful development has been my decision to start mentoring young adults from challenging family backgrounds. Twice a month, I volunteer at a community center, teaching both technical skills and the life lessons I learned the hard way about healthy relationships and self-respect. What began as a devastating betrayal transformed into an opportunity for growth that extended far beyond myself. Jake is slowly rebuilding his life with actual effort rather than shortcuts and manipulation. My parents are learning to relate to both their sons as adults rather than extensions of themselves. And I have discovered that family is not defined by blood but by mutual respect and care. The hardest lesson I learned through this ordeal was that sometimes loving someone means allowing them to face the consequences of their actions. By enabling Jake all those years, my parents were not showing love, but its opposite, preventing him from developing into a responsible adult. True support sometimes means stepping back and allowing people to experience the natural outcomes of their choices. Have you ever had to establish difficult boundaries with family or friends? Did you struggle with guilt even when you knew you were doing the right thing? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more real-life stories about overcoming family challenges. Thank you for listening, and remember, blood makes you related, but respect and trust make you family. Stay strong, and I will see you in the next video.